Hey, Hawkeye fans, Chad Leistikow, now joined by there he is, joined by Tyler Tachman of the Des Moines Register. Had a few technical difficulties coming in. Apparently, his camera wasn't working, the microphone wasn't working. It was like the Hawkeye first half, just a total disaster. But you've recovered, and now we're in the Hawkeye second half here, Tyler, and all things are going to be smooth from here on out, right?
Yeah, I think that was a good comparison. I think if you can hear me now, hopefully.
Yeah, we can, and we can also say that Iowa defeats Troy 38-21. I think if you told someone before the game you're going to win 38-21 against Troy, you'd probably feel like, okay. I mean, the spread was 22, like, okay, probably wasn't like perfect, but sounds okay. But this one was pretty tense, obviously. Hawks trail 14-10 at halftime. I'm kind of curious how you feel about this performance coming out of the game, because it seems like there's a wide range of Hawkeye fans out there, how they're reacting to this. And not that any one of them is wrong or right, but it just seems like some are just absolutely fed up with some extents of this Hawkeye team. Others are seeing a much more positive viewpoint of this, the way that Iowa responded to this. So where do you land on this, Tyler?
Well, I guess just to recap, so the first half response to what you would want to see coming out of the Iowa State game was not very encouraging. Like Iowa came out, it was very similar to the Illinois State game in that they weren't really able to finish drives in the first half after the red zone struggles against Iowa State. Cade McNamara has open Luke Lachey, in which would have been a touchdown. Basically, doesn't throw it. Instead, it goes to fourth down. Iowa goes for it and doesn't get it and turns the ball over without getting any points at all. And then is going into the break losing. So it wasn't the most kind of encouraging way to start things. But then the second half was very similar to that Illinois State second half, where just the running game, Caleb Johnson, Iowa really imposed its will. There was a little wrinkle in the red zone in the first half and second half with putting in Brennan Sullivan in some red zone packages, which I thought was, it was good to see Iowa being flexible with what it does with its personnel offensively. But bigger picture, it's just like you don't really know what to expect with Iowa right now. The highs are really high, the lows are really low. They've proven that when they're rolling, they can be really good, but when things are going bad, they can also be pretty bad. So they got to find some kind of medium and a way to eliminate and limit the bad and kind of bridge that with the good. So on the bright side, when I was rolling, man, they look like they can be a really good team. But when things are going bad, it's not good at all.
I think where I land so far, at least not for the season. Obviously, last week's loss is going to sting. You can't change that. But I think where I come out of today, at least right now, I still haven't written my follow column yet, but I feel like there's enough you can grab onto, especially on offense, where you're like, okay, that's encouraging. This is much better than last year. I mean, 462 yards. Of course, you have to take the opponent into effect, but we saw Iowa win a game 2 years ago, 7-3 with two safeties. I mean, the bar of offense has been so low that today was a case where as I wrote in my initial thoughts column, they actually had to outscore Troy today with the offense. They had to come up with touchdowns, and they came up with 3 70-plus yard scoring drives in the second half. And so, that's what the type of response you want from a team. I think we should point out that coming out of Kirk Ferentz's post-game presser, Tyler, is that he said in warmups, which I thought was real interesting. I'm glad he shared this with us because you don't always get this insight. He said when he was walking around in warmups, he did not like what he saw from his team. And so I think that leads you to believe that the first half was more a flat Hawkeye performance than maybe you get most games. And we wondered if there would be a hangover. I thought that was a pretty notable admission because that does help. You can't be locked. I mean, you can be, but no team is just locked in from start to finish. I mean, looking across the country, Georgia's in a 3-3 game right now at halftime with Kentucky. Like, Notre Dame last week against Northern Illinois, Jamari Harris brought that up. you can't be locked in like 48 straight quarters, start to finish. Now, Iowa's been way up, way down, like you said. But I think what Kirk Ferentz shared explains part of what happened in the first half. There was mental errors, obviously, on special teams and defense. And, kind of there was some other weird stuff going on. It was just a weird game. But in the end, Iowa got down to business and won it.
Yeah, I mean, that's not really good to hear that Kirk Ferentz was. I mean, it's good that he shared it with us, but it's not good to hear that he felt like they were flat and warm, because this was the type of game where, like, you would expect Iowa just to come out and want to just flatten someone after coming out of that Iowa State game. And the fact that that didn't happen until the second half, and that maybe it was some of kind of the mental errors early on, that's not great, especially because the backbone of this team really is having that kind of that mental strength and having a bunch of leaders and guys like that. Now, I mean, we were both down on the field before the game. I didn't see anything for me personally that was like, oh, they just don't look focused. I didn't see anything like that. Obviously, Kirk Ferentz has a better kind of grasp on things, so obviously I'll trust his word on it. But maybe one of the more concerning things is just Iowa's defense, the secondary, and how they've been exposed with big plays. We saw it happen against Iowa State, where they had the 75-yard touchdown and gave up 20 points in the second half. And then today, big plays again, 2 in the secondary. The first on TJ Hall, and the second one where it looked like it would have been TJ Hall on the surface, but I can say with pretty good authority that actually should have been Quinn Schulte's assignment. So that, I guess blame would fall more on Quinn Schulte on that one. But then you also have the punt return. And that's the type of mental errors that Iowa doesn't usually make. And that's what's made just these first 3 games weird, because it's been a roller coaster. And usually that isn't Iowa. Iowa is pretty, consistent and not getting too high and not getting too low. And that's what, I don't know, it just feels there's about a bunch of kind of just wonky, weird things, one being that the defense hasn't been exactly what we expected, and the other being that Iowa is usually pretty steady and not getting too high, not getting too low. And it feels like these first 3 games, it's been just the 2 halves in each of these 3 games have just been drastically different.
Yeah, I mean, I think my theory, this offseason theory on the defense that a lot of people scoffed at. I didn't know if this was accurate or not, but I was curious. If Iowa gets an offense, then I'm not saying like they have like some great offense, but they are averaging 419 yards a game, which is they could barely get to 300 last year in any game. But if Iowa has some kind of offense at all, would opposing offenses start to take more chances against Iowa's defense? And they are, and they're hitting them. And we've seen that all 3 games, really. I mean, Illinois State couldn't hurt Iowa as much, but Iowa State obviously did. And these guys, they had some good athletes, no question about it. That we got to give Devontae Ross credit, man. That guy's a good player. I wonder if we'll see him in the NFL someday. They like 5 catches, 142 yards, and a 77-yard punt return touchdown. Pretty good game for him. But I just feel like this defense has gotten a lot of credit for being really good, really good. But they just were not tested last year at all. And they had Cooper DeJean last year. And that's where the defense isn't what it was. And so your offense is going to have to score. Until the defense shows it is like last year, it's, these games are going to be like, they're probably not all going to be 10-7 like they were last year. They're probably going to be more like this, where it's a little bit more high scoring, like a little bit more normal in college. This is what most college football games are like, everyone. I know you're not used to it, but like teams actually go up and down the field and score. And so Iowa is getting used to that, I feel like, Tyler.
Yeah, and it just feels – well, actually, I would argue that Iowa's defense did get tested. It was against Tennessee, and it did not go well at all. Like, I think –
yeah, that's a good point.
I don't know. I don't know if teams are looking at what Tennessee did, but that's the type of thing where they went high tempo. They had athletes. They spread Iowa out, and they just beat them really badly. It seems like that is kind of what has been hurting Iowa so far this season. And obviously, just not having Cooper DeJean, like Iowa was able to survive for the most part without him those last handful of games last season. But you see the kind of effects of not having a guy like Cooper DeJean, who is just a lockdown guy. And give props to Jamar Harris, so he made a big play today, and that's kind of what you want to see from a turnover perspective and being able to force turnovers. But yeah, no, I just but offensively, like, I mean, we should talk about Caleb Johnson. I know we've talked about him a lot, but like, I mean, he is through 3 games, he's making a case to like be an All-American, like first team, second team. Like, he is right now one of the best running backs in the nation. And at a certain point, like, I don't know, teams are just going to have to throw the kitchen sink to try to stop him, which brings us to the point of what Iowa's quarterback plays. Like, and look, Cade McNamara coming off of that Iowa State game took pretty heavy criticism. He goes against Troy, 19 for 23, 176 yards, no touchdowns, and probably what I would say the most important was no interceptions. He didn't turn the ball over at all. But 19 of 23, I guess you can gripe about, well, how was he throwing it downfield or not? 19 of 23 is like
83%. 83%.
Yeah, that's really hard to do. And if he can continue to do that, like get close to replicating that again in Big Ten play, I think you feel really good. Now, obviously, that's a big question, but it was, I guess, a step forward from the Iowa State game, but there's obviously still more to prove with Cade. But I don't know. It's they're going to have to throw probably the ball downfield at some point because just teams aren't going to let Caleb, or they're going to try not to let Caleb run wild like he has these first 3 games. So, but you feel good in that sense, like you said, about the offense. 462 yards, 284 rushing yards. Like, I mean, Iowa has a legit dude that they can lean on offensively, and that's really good news for Iowa.
Yeah, he's amazing, actually. I mean, some of his runs that weren't the big runs were pretty impressive today. He was dragging tacklers, getting more yards out of something. I mean, they got to keep him healthy. He ends up with 25 carries for 173 today. And one thing I wanted to point out on top of that, Tyler, was, you know, the Tim Lester offense. Something he talked about a lot coming into the season was he wants more big plays, and especially in the run game. And they just continue to do that. And I think that is really impressive what they've done again. And they did it against Iowa State too. So it's not like it was just Troy or just Illinois State. They did it against Iowa State last week too. Obviously, quarterback play was costly last week. But today, 9 total plays on offense of at least 10-plus yards, but 8 of at least 18 yards on offense, okay? And then 5 runs of 19 or more. So Caleb Johnson had runs of 39, 19, and 33 for a touchdown. Kamari Moulton had a 29-yard run. And Jazz Patterson had a 39-yard run, Tyler, for a touchdown late in this game. So you add it all up, Iowa rushes for 284. I mean, that's notable, and you can't ignore that. And so I think that, like, as choppy as it does look sometimes, like, this is also part of what it's like to be in games that are not 10-7. Like, there are swings. I think Iowa fans have just gotten so used to these 13-10, 17-10s that they know how it's supposed to go. And same with us. And I think that's what Iowa got lulled into last week too. I think they got lulled into the fact that, okay, it's 19-7. We're good. I mean, just lock it down from here. And it's just not – this team isn't quite built like that because of the secondary is not as proven, and the offense is generating more big plays. So it's just not like, 3 yards, 5 yards, 3 yards, first down. It's like big chunk plays. And I think that's okay, especially because, Iowa is uncorking them.
Yeah, it just feels like a different type of game, like you were saying. It's just a different rhythm to it, and it's not what you're necessarily used to with Iowa games. But I also want to take a little bit of time to talk more about Brennan Sullivan, using that as kind of a red zone weapon. And that was encouraging to me beyond the fact that, like, so the first drive he was in there, he just handed the ball off to Caleb Johnson and he scored a touchdown. I was like, that's me or you could have been in there handing it off and he would have scored. So it's not like that was some, like, crazy scheme or something like that.
It was a great handoff.
Yeah, great form on the handoff.
It was a pistol formation though, which I texted Scott Docterman. He said that's the first time he can ever remember Iowa in a pistol formation. So
am I hearing some DVR Monday on Brennan Sullivan's handoff in the first half?
Yeah, one full section on it. Yes.
No, but actually, I want the whole story on it, not one section. Come on now. But no, beyond that, like, the importance I saw in that was that Iowa was being a willingness to be more flexible. Like, we've been asking that of, well, would you authorize some type of red zone package to get someone that's a quarterback that's more mobile in the game? Like, would Iowa change up their personnel a little bit just to add another dimension that the defense has to worry about? Because all of a sudden you have to worry about Brennan Sullivan tucking it and running it. That's just another element that the defense has to worry about. And the fact that Iowa, it finally showed, like, they finally showed a willingness to do that, to add a little bit of wrinkle in the red zone offense, to not just continue with one quarterback, whether that have been Deacon Hill last season or Cade McNamara this season. It just shows a little bit more flexibility. And now it's not wholesale changes, which has been pretty clear that Kirk Ferentz is not going to make. So as long as he's the head coach at Iowa, it's going to be done a pretty specific way. But the fact that Iowa, they were okay in making a little bit of a change. So I thought that was an encouraging sign. And I know there's still people that probably are not pleased with the way Cade McNamara is playing and that want Brennan Sullivan to be in there full time. But I think given what Kirk Ferentz is probably willing to do, like, that was kind of a nice change of pace and a nice little happy medium to show that at least they're willing to utilize Brennan Sullivan, because you have him there on the sideline. This is what they got him from Northwestern for, so you can utilize him in the best way that's possible. And I think moving forward, that's just another variable that defenses are going to have to worry about.
Yeah, I like that they did something different. I mean, you got to give them a little credit, and it worked. They were 2 for 2. When they got in there. I'm curious to see where the line is. When does Brendan come in? I mean, they're not going to, does he do it every time? Do they start when they're inside the 10, the 15, the 12? Like, who knows? Like, who knows what they're going to do going forward? But it does give Minnesota next week something else to at least prepare for. And yes, he threw one pass. It was a little push pass, but he does. I can't remember who pointed it out. Was it Caleb Johnson? He's like, yeah, he can pass the ball too. It's not like he's just a running quarterback, So I think that's, I don't know. I think it's cool. It gives us something to, watch and, okay, here comes Brent, I think that, as long as you're successful with it, it gives you a little confidence too, like, I think, it gives you a little boost. And so, yeah, well, I view that as a positive. Anything else before we get to 3-word headlines? Anything else defense played pretty well? Like, I mean, not defense played well, but like the pass. I was going to say pass rush played well.
Yeah, Ethan Hurkett, really good game.
Yeah.
Brian Allen, Max Llewellyn. I thought Jeremiah Pittman played pretty good as well. So D-line has been good. Linebacker's been good. I feel like for defensively, the biggest question right now is secondary, and just the explosive plays really is being able to limit those as much as possible. Because I don't know, the style that we've seen Iowa play these 3 games, how it's been different kind of just in terms of it being more high scoring. Like, I'm curious to see how that translates to Big Ten play. Like, is Iowa going to go to Minnesota a week from today and it's going to be a 13-7 game? Like, is that going to hold up? Is that going to hold up when they play the Minnesotas and the Wisconsins and the Michigan States of the world? Like, is Iowa going to be able to impose itself? I don't know. But that Minnesota game is going to be really revealing of where Iowa is and what type of growth they have made since that Iowa State game.
Yeah, and I know we'll talk about that game a lot this week, but it really feels like a must-win. And they had to get this one first to make. Otherwise, it's just, I don't know. This place might have gotten blown up or something, people are be just furious. But it's, if they had somehow won last week, if that kick flies wide left, like I keep saying, like I think people's attitudes about this team will be so much different, and so I still think this team is on a typical Iowa track. It's never a finished product in September. The problem is in the playoff era that sometimes that might hurt you more than you think. Like you think, oh, we can afford a loss or two, but when you have a schedule like Iowa's and you have basically one ranked team the rest of the way, and now maybe I guess Nebraska's in the pool now, but like you don't have a lot of opportunities unless you go beat Ohio State. But anyway, if they don't win next week, then and I'm sure it's going to be difficult. I mean, they lost to Minnesota here last year. I'm guessing the spread will be pretty tight, so it's going to be tough. But it's a must-win, kind of to keep things positive going into Ohio State.
Yeah, well, just to build on moving forward, is that if Iowa plays like they did against Troy in the Big Ten, like it's not difficult to see them losing 3 or 4 of those games. Like they have to get better. They have to improve off of this and kind of bridge some of those really highs and really lows. They got to find a way. Consistency is I know that's probably way overused, but they've got to find a way to be more consistent. Because I mean, if you just think about probably how you were feeling at halftime of this game, like you were probably like, the season's over. Like this is terrible. I mean, they're losing at halftime to Troy in a game that you would have hoped that they came out and just absolutely blew the doors off of them. So it has been, I mean, I think probably a roller coaster is the best way to describe it at this point, especially because even more so for Kirk Ferentz. He's not there game 1, game 2, just a really emotional loss, and now this. So, yeah, it's just they got to find a way to just find a way to be more consistent at this point.
A couple people were asking about Cade's demeanor when Sullivan went in. I didn't notice anything, and he was asked about it in the post game, and yeah, pretty short answer I would say, but just happy to see success, etc. So I think it's a good way to get him involved, honestly. So
yeah, I mean,
scored 14 points in 4 snaps. So
yeah,
successful start for the Brennan Sullivan experiment. Let's do some 3-word headlines before we go. Common theme here. And I'm going to start with kind of the negatives. Ryan Street, still not satisfied. Kevin Patterson, Hawks in trouble. Brenton and Marion, smokescreen win. Zach Grubb, not feeling confident. Hawkerella had one too. Victorious, not optimistic. So as I scroll, a lot of these are still pretty cautious about this team, which I get it. I mean, totally get it.
Yeah, but social media is obviously a very glass half full place, so that's not surprising at all. But no, I mean, yeah, like I said, I agree with most of that stuff. I was still very much they need to prove it. Like, I don't know, they've beaten Troy and Illinois State up to this point in the season. So
yeah, the 2 easiest games on the schedule. Jesse Lucier, secondary primary concern? ? I thought that was a good one.
On defense, for sure, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Gabe Johnson's always good for a few. Coaching needs improving, he says, is one of his 5. And I thought I was really disappointed in Kirk Ferentz's decision not to go for points at the end of the first half. At the same time, I knew what his thought process was, and he basically said exactly that in the post game. I don't agree with it, but he had a gut feel that nothing good could happen. He didn't have a feeling they could go down and get points, even though they only needed 35 yards probably to get in Drew Stevens' field goal range with one timeout. So that's why I don't understand that. You got a free chance to maybe go get some points, but I think he just didn't want to make a bad situation worse. That was his explanation. So he basically said, that's on me. He knows the fans are mad at him. That's what he said. And I agree with the fans. I think they should have gone for points, but in the end, Hawks win, scored 28 points in the second half. So maybe he was right. Vince Ackerman survived big plays. Laura says that McNamara not good. A lot of these still say Cade's not good. Okay. So, and I totally get it. But I think I guess I'm going to have to watch the tape again. But 19 to 23, and one of those was a drop by Vanderzee. I felt comfortable with the way he played today, just in general. That's what you want, a mistake-free, highly accurate game. I don't know. What pass did McNamara miss? Well, the Lachey thing. I get early. He didn't throw the Lachey pass, I guess. So, yeah, totally get that. But I don't know. I felt like he was what you needed, I guess, for the most part today. Not great, not terrible.
Yeah, it wasn't like he put up a stat line where he was just throwing the ball over the yard and it's going to, quiet all skepticism. But to me, he did the two biggest things that Iowa didn't have at quarterback last season, which is one, accuracy and having a high completion percentage, and two, taking care of the ball. Like those were two of the main issues with Deacon Hill last season. And Cade McNamara checked both of those boxes. Now, you just look at what he's done through 3 games this season. He's played his best 2 games against the 2 worst opponents. He's played his worst game against the team that you would have wanted him to play the best against. So there's still a lot for him to prove. He's still going to have to prove that he can do it against higher level competition. We'll get a good glimpse of that against Minnesota. I don't think you feel – I guess you could – say that this was a little bit of a step forward. I personally think that this was a good bounce back game for him. But I don't feel totally settled at quarterback. That's probably still my biggest question offensively is where is Iowa at quarterback? Can they get consistent production? Can Cade be the quarterback that Iowa needs him to be?
Yeah. There's, Justin Mice has put in Sully. There's a lot of anti-Cade stuff in here. A lot of anti-TJ Hall stuff in here, but as Tyler pointed out, the second touchdown was not his fault. That was more on the safety, playing that over the drifting away from that spot, and so it's always good to check on those things. And I'm glad you did, Tyler. So that one wasn't on him, and Ferentz even said that afterwards. Said it was more of a miscommunication, and that's free safety that needs to make that play. So. You think about it, just about everybody in the secondaries had their moments so far this season, except maybe Jamari. Jamari got his moment in a good way, a pick 6 today. Huge play, by the way.
We saw some Deshaun Lee as well today.
Yeah, a little bit. Nestor got burned earlier in the year. Mm-hmm. Cohen Entringer got thrown at today and beat for a big 3rd down completion. Wampa last week. Wampa was at least chasing the punt return. There was a lot of guys that didn't hold the edge on the punt return, but Wampa was out there. TJ Hall, Quinn Schultz. Castro. They've all been burned this year pretty much. That's crazy to think about, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's emerging as the way to beat Iowa. Through 3 games at least. Total yards, Troy goes 253. They had 24 rushing yards. So it's like, that's how Rocco Becht and Iowa State kind of picked apart Iowa last week. So that's the run game. Iowa's rush defense has been really good. I credit to the defensive line, Jay Higgins, Nick Jackson for doing that. But the back end, I was going to have 2 safeties back there. They want to play. They want to defend against big plays. So they got to stop it. They can't. If this is what Troy is doing to Iowa. Imagine what Ohio State could do. That's where my real concern is. Like, if this is what a Troy team is doing to Iowa secondary, like it's not going to get easier when you're against Ohio State. They got to figure it out by then.
Let's finish with. I lost it. I had a good one. Lance. Lance Becker says jury's still out. I think that's a good way to put it. All right, Tyler. We get to finish with you here. Dargan says in the chat, people want to know your thoughts on Indiana Hoosiers football. I don't know what the score is right now, but last check was they were up 21-7 at UCLA late.
Is it really?
Well, I'll check. You start talking about how good they are.
Okay. Well, they're off to a really good start, apparently, is what I was hearing. 14-0. And I don't know. I every time you feel like you get your hopes up with Indiana football, it comes crashing down. So
all right, let's get a score for those of you watching live and don't have the game on. Indiana 28-10 late in the 3rd. 28-10.
Don't worry, there's still time for them to blow it. Don't worry. But
Huskers are leading the Panthers 24-3. No big surprises in the Big Ten today, really, except Purdue just looked horrendous.
Yeah.
66-7 to Notre Dame.
That-
Minnesota, by the way, beat Nevada 27-0. Nevada beat Troy, just FYI.
Okay.
So
that's good to know.
Little comparison game there. So
And Troy lost the coin flip.
yes, they did.
What was the stat? What was the stat that you had?
They've lost. I mean, it was from the game notes, so I didn't track all their coin flips. But they have now lost 23 of their last 31 coin flips. So almost 75% of the time they lose the coin flip, which is almost a statistical improbability.
I'm no math major, but that just does not seem good.
So it was hilarious when that happened. They called tails and it was heads.
I mean, why would you call tails? Like, I mean, just call heads. Everyone knew that it was going to be heads. I don't know why they would call
tails. Never fails, man.
Hey, except today.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for joining us, folks. Hopefully you enjoyed this one. Hopefully it was cathartic. Tyler Tachman, Chad Leistikow, Hawk Central. I still got to do some more writing. So do you, Tyler. So we'll let you go. Thanks for joining us.